The sliver of aluminum, bent and worried between Arthur's numb, aching fingers, finally snapped. It was a poor substitute for a lockpick, just a shard of a soda can he'd found in the weed-choked driveway. But the ancient padlock was more rust than steel. The cold in the cellar was a physical weight, a damp, clinging thing that had found its way past the flannel, past the thin thermal, and had settled deep into his bones. It wasn't the clean, dry cold of a farm winter. It was a grave cold, smelling of earth and time. The padlock, a solid, orange-furred brick of rust, didn't so much click open as sigh. It was a sound of finality, of release, its heavy shackle falling loose with a gritty puff of oxidation that smelled like pennies and time. He didn't use the flashlight. The batteries were weak, and he was saving them. He didn't know what for. A darker room? A deeper hole? Besides, he didn't need it. The single grime-caked bulb in the center of the cellar, dangling from a frayed, cloth-wrapped cord, cast just enough weak yellow light to make the shadows seem solid, to give them corners and weight. The light didn't illuminate, it just made the darkness visible. Upstairs, he could hear Ellie. A muffled scraping sound, the legs of a rotted chair being dragged across a warped floor. Then, the cough. It was a dry, rasping percussion, a sound he hated more than the wind, more than the cold, more than the smell of mold. It was the soundtrack of their poverty, the sound of a copay they couldn't afford, of a prescription they'd stretched, of the specialist in the city they'd never see. It echoed in the cavernous, empty rooms of the seized property, a hollow counterbeat to the wind whistling through the broken Palladian windows, a sound like a tattered flag snapping in a gale. This house, this monument to someone else's ruin. He and Ellie had sat in their cold truck for 10 minutes this morning, just staring at it. The crumbling portico, the black-streaked siding. A child's tricycle, rusted into a single skeletal piece, lying on its side in the dead brown grass. "It's a tomb, Arthur," Ellie had whispered, her hand on the door handle, not moving. "It's $100, Elle," had said. "We paid. We're going in." They'd spent their last $100 on it, not the house, just the contents, the leavings. The marshal, a man with a clipboard and eyes that had seen too much, had met them at 9 a.m. He hadn't gotten out of his car, just rolled down the window, the smoke from his cigarette washing over them. "All yours till sundown, folks. Keys in the lockbox. Codes 1234. Real original. Good luck. Looks like you'll need it. And watch the front steps. Third one's a killer." And the contents, so far, were a spectacular, water-stained testament to failure. 3 grand, high-ceilinged rooms of particle-board furniture, the kind you buy in a flat box, now swollen and warped into grotesque sculptures. Carpets stiff with mold, blooming in fractal patterns of black and gray. A kitchen that smelled of sour death, where a sub-zero refrigerator stood open and empty, its shelves a toxic swamp of mildew. Arthur had wanted to turn back then. He had wanted to take Ellie by her thin, frail arm, lead her back to the truck, and just go, drive until the gas ran out. But where? Back to the bungalow? Back to the red-bordered rent check they couldn't pay, stuck under a magnet on their own clean, empty fridge? Back to the hiss of the oxygen tank in the corner that they rented by the week? No. This $100, the last of the emergency money they'd kept in a porcelain sugar bowl, was the final, desperate pull of a slot machine. A prayer. He'd left Ellie upstairs in the relative light. Her job was to sift through the paper, the junk mail, the rotted books, looking for old stamps or postcards. His job was the heavy work, the basement. But this room, this concrete block cellar beneath the grand rotting staircase, was the last. It smelled of damp earth and something metallic, like old spilled wine. And it was here, behind a teetering stack of rotted, vinegar-smelling wine crates, that he saw it. It wasn't a safe. It wasn't a hidden door. It was just a single concrete block, darker than the others, a shade of gray that meant it was a different mix. Its mortar line was cracked and recessed, as if it had been moved 100 times, a loose tooth and a rotten jaw. He'd worked at it for an hour with the rusted tire iron he'd found in the garage. At first, he'd been frantic, his breath plumbing in the bitter air, his knuckles raw and bleeding before he even noticed. He'd attacked it, imagining it full of gold, of cash, of the answer. Then the despair had set in. It was probably nothing. A plumber's access, a forgotten bit of construction. His heart had hammered with the effort, a painful, irregular rhythm he'd promised Ellie he'd avoid. And he'd had to sit down on an overturned bucket, his head between his knees, waiting for the gray spots to clear. But the farmer in him, the man who had spent a life reading the land, knew this was different. It was deliberate. Now it was loose. He braced his aching feet on the damp floor, the thin soles of his work boots offering no protection from the cold. He jammed the tire iron in the one last time, leaned back with a grunt that tore at his throat, and the block scraped free, revealing a dark, square void. He knelt, his knees cracking in protest. He reached inside, his flannel sleeve snagging on the rough concrete. His fingers, numb and clumsy, brushed not paper, not metal, not glass, but velvet. A box, small, maybe the size of a shoebox, but heavy, and wrapped in disintegrating burgundy velvet. The nap of the fabric was stiff with damp, but unmistakably plush. He pulled it out. It wasn't locked. The lid was simple, flush fit. He worked his fingernails into the seam, his heart, which had been a dull, tired drum all day, suddenly tight and painful in his chest. The tiny brass hinges, green with verdigris, screamed in the silence. A sound so loud he was sure Ellie must have heard it upstairs. His breath caught. It wasn't money. It wasn't jewels. It wasn't gold. It was a shoe. A single, pearl-white child sandal, pristine, with a tiny mother-of-pearl button on the strap. The leather was impossibly soft, preserved by the box and the dark. And beneath it, tied in faded blue ribbon, were letters, stacks of them. He picked up the sandal. It was the size of his palm. He thought, for one searing, white-hot second, of the tiny bronzed booty packed in a box in the attic of their rented bungalow, the one that had belonged to David. He remembered the weight of his own son, a squirming, laughing boy on his knee, trying to tug that boot off. A memory so sharp, so sudden, it was a physical pain, a fist clenching in his gut. He sank to his knees on the cold concrete, the dust motes dancing in the single shaft of yellow light. His hand was shaking so badly he nearly dropped the shoe. This wasn't salvage. This was a grave. This was a shrine. Wait, before you see what's inside. If this story already has your heart pounding, tell us where you're watching from. When forgotten boxes open, when second chances hide under dust and debt, subscribe and stay close. You'll never guess what's been left behind. Now, back to the lock clicking open. Arthur didn't call for Ellie. This, whatever this was, felt intensely private. It felt like a confession, a secret he had stumbled into, a mass he had no right to observe. He sat on an overturned crate, the damp seeping through his thin jeans, and untied the first ribbon. The silk was so brittle it practically crumbled in his fingers. The paper, thick and creamy, was brittle at the edges. The ink, a faded, elegant blue, was in a looping, feminine hand. He didn't need the flashlight. He angled the letter toward the weak bulb, the spidery script jumping into focus. My dearest Marco. They are watching the house again, the black sedan. It's the same one, a Lincoln, but the men are different. The man with the hat who pretends to read the paper. He never turns the page. You said I was imagining it. You said I was high-strung. You said we were safe here. But I see the way you look at the door every time a car passes on the main road. I see the way your hand tightens on the whiskey glass, the ice clicking. You built this house to be a fortress, you said, a palace for your queen and your prince. But it's a cage, my love, and I am so very, very tired of being afraid. Arthur frowned, his skin prickling. Marco. The newspapers, when the feds finally seized the property for back taxes and racketeering charges and God knows what else, had called him Marco the Altar Boy Cellini. The name was a joke, they said, because of the things he'd done. An enforcer, a ghost, the kind of man who didn't build houses with grand staircases and Palladian windows for himself, but for a family he was trying to buy or to hide. He heard Ellie cough again, that same dry, rasping sound that tore at his own lungs. 72 years old, and this was what he'd brought her to. Scavenging in a dead man's house, living on a social security check that evaporated the day it arrived, swallowed by copays and rent and the ever-climbing price of gas. This $100 gamble, this last pathetic grasp at hope, was supposed to be a miracle. A lost painting in an attic, a set of antique furniture not ruined by damp, something to sell, something to keep the lights on through January. Instead, he was sitting in a mobster's crypt, reading his dead wife's mail. He untied the second bundle. The paper was different, thinner. The handwriting was different too, stronger, darker. The pen strokes were angry, slashing. Rosaria, stop writing things down. Stop. Do you want them to find this? Do you want them to know? Burn this. The house is safe. The sedan is nothing. It's business. You are the wife of a man of respect. Start acting like it. I am handling things. I will always handle things. Take Leo to the park. Buy him the ice cream. Stop worrying. You make yourself sick. You make me sick with this worry. Leo, the shoe. Arthur looked back into the hollowed-out block. He reached in again, his fingers probing the cold, empty space. This time, his hand brushed a small, mylar-wrapped package. He pulled it out. It was a photograph, sealed against the damp. He held it to the light. A woman, dark-haired and heartbreakingly beautiful, with a sadness in her eyes that even the forced bright smile couldn't hide. Rosaria. A man, broad-shouldered, in a crisp dark suit, his arm around her in a way that was both protective and possessive. His face was a mask of pride. Marco. And between them, a little boy in a starched white sailor suit, not smiling, his face set in a perfect miniature version of the man's scowl. The boy was holding a small white dog, a terrier mix, Leo. He looked to be about 3 years old, David's age when he... Arthur? Arthur, are you down there? I swear if you found a rat's nest, I'm calling the marshal. I am not dealing with rats, Arthur, not for $100. Ellie's voice was thin, but it held the same steel it had held for 50 years. The steel that had held him together when David died, when the farm failed, when his heart gave out. He quickly, guiltily, slid the letters and the photo back into the velvet box. He left the shoe out, a small, pale accusation. "Coming, Elle, I'm coming." He climbed the stairs, his knees cracking, the tiny sandal hidden in the cavernous pocket of his flannel. When he emerged into the grand, decaying foyer, the sight of her nearly broke him. She was huddled in her threadbare coat, a floral scarf wrapped around her white hair, her small, gloved hands tucked into her armpits for warmth. She was standing in the center of the foyer, looking at a massive, dark stain on the marble floor, as if it had personally offended her. "Well?" she said, not looking at him. "More garbage? More of Mr. Cellini's exquisite taste in mildew and despair." "It's cold down there, Elle. Colder than up here. Let's go. Let's get home. Go? She spun on him, her eyes, still a sharp, startling blue, flashing. Arthur, we paid the marshal for the day. We have to clear it out. We have to find something. The rent check won't clear. You know it. I know it. The bank knows it. We are not leaving. I know, he said, his voice softer than he intended. I know, Ellie. We'll come back tomorrow. It's colder than I thought. My chest, it's tight. I need to get you warm. It was a low blow, using his heart, but it was the only one he had. She finally looked at him, really looked at him. Her gaze softened from steel to simple worry. Then her eyes narrowed. She knew him. She knew every tell. What's in your pocket? What are you hiding? He'd never been able to lie to her, not really. He pulled his hand from his pocket, the white sandal resting on his calloused, dirt-caked palm. Ellie's breath hitched. Her hand flew to her mouth, her glove muffling a sound that was half sob, half gasp. She didn't touch it. She didn't move. She just stared, her eyes fixed on the tiny, perfect mother-of-pearl button. "Oh, Arthur," she whispered, and the steel was gone, replaced by a fragility that terrified him. "Oh, my God, what have you found?" "I don't know, Elle," he said, his voice thick. "I really, really don't know." They drove home in their rattling '98 Ford pickup, the heater blasting recycled, dusty air that smelled of engine oil. The velvet box sat on the bench seat between them, a silent, heavy passenger. The silence in the cab was deafening. Arthur was driving on autopilot, his mind back in the cellar. He could feel Ellie's eyes on him, on his profile, but he couldn't look at her. He couldn't bear to see the hope that he knew was dawning in her face. Hope, he thought, was more dangerous than despair. Despair you could get used to. Hope broke your heart all over again. Ellie, for her part, was silent, but her hands were twisting in her lap. She was looking at the box, not as a shrine, but as a solution. He could feel the energy coming off her, hot and needy. She had seen the shoe, and her first thought after the initial shock had been value, antique, collector. He'd seen the flicker. He saw it now. The bungalow was small, just 4 rooms, but it was clean. Ellie's doing. No matter how poor they got, she fought back the tide of entropy with a fierce, stubborn pride. While he had been sinking, she had been scrubbing. The house smelled of lemon soap and the Lipton's tea bags she saved and dried for a second, weaker use. She immediately went to the stove to boil water for tea, her movements stiff and angry. He knew this anger. It was her fear, sharpened to a point. Arthur sat at the small kitchen table, the linoleum worn through to the black adhesive underneath, and placed the velvet box in the center. He laid it all out. The shoe, the photograph, the 2 bundles of letters. Ellie sat opposite him, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug of Lipton's. "Read them," she said. It wasn't a request. So he did. He read them aloud, his voice raspy in the small, quiet kitchen. They read them all. They read for hours, as the sun went down, as the single bulb over the table cast their shadows long against the wall, as the small kitchen filled with the ghosts of Rosaria and Marco and little Leo. The letters told a story, not of a gangster, but of a man trapped. Marco was deep, over his head, with a family that didn't value family. He was trying to get out. He'd been skimming, building a nest egg, planning an escape. "He's teething again," Arthur read, his voice softening as he read Rosaria's words. "He cried all night. He only stopped when I let him hold your cufflink, the one with the tiger's eye. He is so much like you. He has your scowl. I saw it this morning when I gave him peas." Ellie's eyes closed for a second. "David hated peas," she whispered. Arthur cleared his throat and continued. Marco's replies were short, harsh, paranoid. "Marco, don't let him. Don't let him be like me. I mean it, Rosie. Take him to your mother's in Vermont. I have to go to Chicago. When I get back, it will be time. Have the bags ready, the ones we talked about. Just the essentials. Be ready. I'm not losing you. I'm not losing him. Rosaria's fear grew with each letter. It's been 3 weeks. The men in the sedan are still here. But they're different men, Marco. These ones, they don't look away. They watch the house. They watch me take Leo to the park. Marco, I'm scared. Leo keeps asking for you. He won't let go of the shoe. He lost the other one at the lake. He cried for an hour. My love, please come home. Just come home. She should have run, Ellie said, her voice tight. She should have just grabbed the boy and run. Run where, Elle? Arthur said, looking at her. Run with what? He had the money. He had the plan. He read the last letter from Marco. Marco, don't go to your mother's. It's not safe. Stay in the house. Lock the doors. Don't talk to anyone. I am almost done. I have the papers. I have the money. We're going. Not to Italy. Somewhere new. Somewhere they'll never find us. I have a key. I'm putting it with this. If you find this and I'm not with you, take Leo and go to the bank. The First National. Box 422. Don't trust anyone. Not my brother, not even the priest. Just you. I love you, Rosaria. I love you more than this life I built. Wait for me. This letter was different. It was sealed with a blob of red wax, stamped with a signet ring. But the wax was broken. Rosaria had read it. Tucked into the envelope was a small, ornate brass safe deposit key, a number stamped on its head, 422. Ellie reached out and touched the key. Her finger traced the number. 422, she breathed. And then the last letter. Rosaria's hand, but it was no longer the elegant loop. It was a jagged, angry scrawl, the pen digging into the paper, tearing it in places. You never came. They said you ran. They said you took the money and left us. Your brother, your consigliere, he came to the house. He said you were a disgrace. He said you were in Brazil. But I found this, Marco. I found your escape plan. I found your key. And I'm leaving it. I'm leaving it all, just like you did. I won't touch your blood money. I won't let it poison him. We are leaving, but we aren't running. We are disappearing. You can have your house. You can have your cage. I hope you're warm in it. It was dated October 19th, 1984, 40 years ago. Arthur gently, reverently stacked the letters. The kitchen was silent, save for the hum of the old refrigerator. Ellie spoke first, her voice a rasp. He never came back. He was going to run away with them, but his own people, they got him first. That's what happened. And she thought he'd abandoned her. She thought he was in Brazil. And all this time, he was probably at the bottom of a river. She left the key, Elle, Arthur said, his voice thick. He touched the brass key, cold against his skin. She left it all. She was so angry, so hurt. She left it. Ellie looked at the key, then at Arthur. Her eyes, which had been dull with fatigue, were now hard and bright. It's been 40 years. She's gone. He's gone. Leo, if he's even alive, he's a man who never knew. Arthur, this is it. What's it, Ellie? He asked, though he already knew. The miracle, she whispered, her hand closing over his, her grip surprisingly strong. The rent, the doctor bills, the car. This is what we were sent for. This box, this key. It's not blood money anymore, Arthur. It's just money. It's our chance. God's grace, Arthur, after all this time. Arthur looked at his wife, the woman who had buried a child with him, the woman who had lost their farm to the bank, who had stood silent and stony-faced as the auctioneer sold her grandmother's china, the woman who had sold her own mother's wedding ring, the last good thing she had, to pay for his heart medication. He saw the desperation in her eyes, the raw, aching need that had been simmering for 20 years. She was right. This was it. This was the lifeline they had prayed for. But he couldn't stop looking at the shoe. "It's not ours, Elle," he said quietly, his gaze dropping to the table. "Don't!" she snapped, pulling her hand away as if he'd burned her. "Don't you dare! Don't you dare get righteous on me, Arthur. Not now. Who else is it? The feds? The family that killed him? It's been in a wall for 40 years. It's abandoned property. It's treasure. It's salvage. That's what we do. We are salvagers. This isn't an old lamp, Ellie. This isn't a piece of furniture. This is a man's life. This is a child's. Our child is gone," she cried, and the word hung in the air, sharp as glass. "David is gone, and we are still here. We are old, and we are poor, and we are cold. I will not let you take this from us." "Elle, it's not about pride. It feels wrong. It's a wound. It's not ours to take." "Wrong?" She stood up, her chair scraping. "Wrong? Is it wrong that the bank took our farm? The farm your grandfather built. Was that wrong? Was it wrong when they sold my mother's piano for $10, Arthur? And you just stood there, your hat in your hands, and let them? Was it wrong that my sister had to pay for your heart pills last month? Is that what's wrong, Arthur? That's not fair, Elle." "Fair?" She laughed, a dry, bitter sound that was worse than her cough. "Fair is a word for people who have options. We don't have options. This is an option. This is a key. We will go to the bank. We will open the box, and we will be done with this. We will be safe. I will not die in this house, Arthur, afraid of the first of the month." Arthur looked at the woman he loved, her face pale and strained, her hands twisting in her lap, and he saw a stranger. Or maybe, he thought, his stomach churning, he was the stranger, the one who couldn't see the blessing for the curse. "Tomorrow," he said, his voice heavy as a stone. "We'll go to the bank tomorrow." He slept on the sofa. He didn't sleep. He lay awake, the cushions smelling faintly of dust and Ellie's rosewater, and he held the small white sandal. He had palmed it when he put the other things in the box. He turned it over and over in his hands as if the answers were written in its stitching. He thought of Leo, a boy his son's age, a boy who grew up thinking his father was a coward who abandoned him. He thought of Rosaria, waiting by a window for a man who never came home, her love souring into a hard, bitter resentment that she passed on to her son. He thought of Marco, a bad man trying to do one good thing and failing. He was a simple man, a farmer. He knew soil, he knew weather, and he knew grief. And this box, it felt like grief. It felt like a seed that had been buried in poison, and he didn't know what would grow if he watered it. Ellie wanted the fruit. She wanted it so badly she was willing to ignore the roots. But he couldn't. He remembered David's funeral, the tiny casket, Ellie's silent, shaking shoulders. He remembered the day the bank seized the farm, the auctioneer's sing-song voice, Ellie standing on the porch, her back straight, not shedding a tear until the last car was gone, and then collapsing in his arms. He remembered his heart attack, the searing pain, the wail of the ambulance, and the look of absolute terror in Ellie's eyes, a terror that wasn't for him, but for herself, the terror of being left alone. This key, this box, it could fix that. It could buy her peace of mind. It could pay for the good doctors. It could keep the house warm. It was everything. So why did it feel like a sin? At 4 a.m., he got up. The bungalow was silent, save for Ellie's restless turning in the bedroom. He put the shoe, the letters, the photo, and the key back in the velvet box. He put on his coat, his fingers fumbling with the buttons. He took the truck keys from the hook by the door. Ellie was standing in the doorway, a shadow against the dark hall, her thin nightgown wrapped tight. She hadn't been sleeping either. "You're running away?" she asked, her voice small, a child's voice. "No, Elle," he said, his hand on the doorknob. "I'm going back. I'm putting it back in the wall." Her face crumpled. "You're a fool," she whispered, and the whisper was full of venom. "A sanctimonious, stubborn old fool. This is our life you're putting in that wall. This is my life. Don't you understand what this is? It's our last chance. There are no more chances after this, Arthur." "It's not," he said, pausing at the door, his heart aching. "It's his. It's Leo's. And I won't steal it from him. He's dead. They're all dead, Arthur. You're chasing ghosts. You're sacrificing the living for the dead. You did it with the farm. You did it with everything. You'd rather be righteous than be safe." "Maybe," Arthur said, looking at her, at the tears streaming down her face. "But I'm tired of being haunted by our own ghosts. I can't add his to the list." He left her standing in the dark. The drive to the mansion was fast. The roads were empty. The sun was just a rumor of pale, bruised gray light in the east. He parked in the cracked, weed-choked driveway, the house looming over him like a sleeping giant. It looked different in the dawn, sadder, more pathetic. He didn't need the flashlight. He knew the way. His feet, his bones remembered. He went to the cellar. The air was colder, heavier. It felt like a crypt. He sat on the crate. He opened the box one last time. He looked at the photo. Rosaria, Marco, Leo. A family. A broken one. He took out the key. He held it in his palm. It was heavy. It was the weight of a new car, the weight of a warm winter, the weight of Ellie's smile. So simple. The answer to all his problems. All he had to do was walk away, get in his truck, drive to the bank when it opened. Ellie would forgive him. They would be safe. They would be secure. They would be... He looked at the shoe. David's bronzed booty. Leo's white sandal. "I can't," he whispered to the shadows. "Forgive me, Elle. I just can't." He put the key back in the box. He closed the lid. He slid the box back into the dark void. He picked up the concrete block. It felt heavier than it had before. "Mr. Cellini?" Arthur dropped the block. It hit the concrete floor with a sound like a gunshot, a deafening crack that echoed in the small space. It chipped a crater in the damp cement. He spun around, his heart leaping into his throat, so hard he thought it would burst. A man was standing at the bottom of the cellar stairs. He was tall, wearing a long black wool coat that was impeccably tailored. He was in his late 60s, his hair thick and silver, his face lined but handsome, with a strong jaw and dark, watchful eyes. He looked, Arthur thought with a jolt, like he belonged in this house. He looked like the man in the picture, grown old. "I apologize," the man said, his voice a smooth, cultured baritone. No fear, no surprise, just calm. "I didn't mean to startle you. The front door was open. I'm looking for the owner." "We're not the owners. Arthur stammered, his hand on his chest, trying to catch his breath. We bought the contents. Salvage. Just salvage. The man's eyes, dark and intelligent, scanned the cellar. The rotted crates, the water stains, the chipped block on the floor, and the dark, square hole beside it. His gaze lingered on the void. Salvage, the man repeated. He took a step closer. Arthur instinctively moved to stand in front of the void, a pathetic old guard. The man smiled, a sad, thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. You don't have to protect it. It's not what you think. I'm not one of them. He looked at Arthur, a long, assessing look. You found it. It wasn't a question. Found what? Arthur said, but his voice was trembling. My name is Leo, the man said, holding out a gloved hand. Leo, I think I grew up in this house, or I was supposed to. Arthur's legs gave out. He sat hard on the crate. He looked at the man. The boy in the sailor suit. The scowl. It was him. The man's face held the ghost of that scowl. You're Leo? Leo nodded, his gaze fixed on the hole in the wall. My mother passed away last month, Rosaria. Among her things, she kept nothing. She was not a sentimental woman. She threw away the past with both hands. But I found a small box. In it, a pressed flower, a gardenia. Inside, a bus ticket. A ticket from this town, dated October 20, 1984. And a single pearl-white sandal. The other one. Arthur's hand went to his pocket, where he'd put the first sandal before he'd packed the box. He hadn't been able to put it back in. She'd told me my father was a bad man, a salesman who ran off, that we were better off. But when she was, at the end, she was confused. The medication. She kept whispering, he was supposed to be there, at the bank. He was supposed to meet us. I never knew what she meant. I thought she was delirious. But after she was gone, I started digging. Leo walked past Arthur and knelt, his expensive coat brushing the dusty, chipped floor. He looked at the block. I found out about my father, Marco Cellini. I found out about this house. I found out he disappeared. I hired a private investigator. He found the newspaper articles, the seizure. He found that my father's brother, my uncle, was the one who found him missing, the one who told my mother he'd fled to Brazil. He touched the edge of the void. I don't know what I thought. I just had to see. I had to see the cage he built. He looked up at Arthur, his eyes searching, desperate. What did you find, sir? Arthur was shaking. Not from cold, not from fear, from release. It was as if a great, heavy chain had been lifted. He wasn't a fool. He was a messenger. She thought he abandoned her, Arthur whispered. She came back. She found his last letter. But she was angry. She was so hurt. She left it for him. She left it all. Leo's face, which had been a mask of calm, historical curiosity, shattered. She was here. She came back, and she found it? Arthur reached into the void. He pulled out the velvet box. He didn't open it. He just held it out. He was trying to save you, both of you. Leo looked at the box as if it were a snake. I don't want money, Leo said, his voice choked. I don't. I just had to know. It's not money, Arthur said, his own voice thick. It's letters. It's him. Leo's hands, shaking, took the box. He fumbled with the lid. He opened it. He saw the bundles of letters. He saw the photograph. And he saw the key. He picked up the key. "Box 422, Leo whispered, reading the tag. "She said he was supposed to be at the bank. This is what he was saving for us." "He was trying to get you out," Arthur said. "He was trying to escape. They got him before he could." Leo was no longer looking at Arthur. He was untying the first bundle, his father's handwriting. He pulled the letter from the envelope, his movements clumsy. He read the first few lines, his shoulders beginning to shake. He didn't make a sound, but the tears cut clean, hot tracks through the dust on his cheeks. He sank to the floor, his back against the concrete wall, and he read. He read his father's words. He read his mother's fear. He read the story of his own life, a life he never had. Arthur just sat. He watched. He guarded. He was a farmer, standing watch over a late, impossible 40-year harvest. It was full dawn when Leo finished. He had read every word. He had held the tiny sandal from the box, matching it to the one he'd brought in his own coat pocket. He had looked at the picture of the family that never was, his thumb stroking the face of the little boy he used to be. He looked up at Arthur, his eyes red-rimmed, but no longer sad. They were clear. They were furious. "All my life," Leo said, his voice rough, "I thought I was the son of a coward, a man who ran." He stood up, clutching the letters. You gave me back my father. He was a criminal. He was a bad man, but he wasn't a coward. He loved us. He was trying." "Yes," Arthur said, "he was." Leo looked at the key in his hand. "The First National. It's still on Main Street. It's a Bank of America now, but the investigator said the old vault, the old safe deposit vaults are still there, in the basement." He looked at Arthur. "Come with me." That's not my place, son. This is your story." "You're part of it," Leo said, his voice firm. "You found it. You kept it safe. You waited. My mother, she would have liked you. You're the man she wished he could be. Please, I don't want to go alone." Ellie was sitting on the front porch of the bungalow, a blanket wrapped around her, a cold mug of tea in her hand. She was watching the road. When the truck pulled up, it was almost noon. She stood up, her face a mask of anger and fear. Arthur got out of the passenger side. He looked exhausted, older than he had this morning. He walked up the path to her. "Arthur, He didn't say anything. He just pulled her to him. He held her as she began to cry, small, angry sobs into his flannel shirt. "You old fool!" she wept. "You stubborn, righteous old fool!" "I know, Elle," he murmured, stroking her white hair. "I know." A second car, a sleek black Mercedes, pulled up behind the truck. It hummed. It didn't rumble. Leo got out. He was carrying a small leather satchel. "Ellie," Arthur said, pulling back, his hands on her shoulders. "This is Leo. Leo, this is my wife, Eleanor." Leo smiled, a tired, warm smile. "Ma'am, Arthur has told me a lot about you." Ellie just stared, her eyes wide, confused, her hand going to her mouth. "Leo? But he's dead. You're the boy." "Yes, ma'am," Leo said softly. He placed the satchel on the porch table. He unzipped it. "We went to the bank. The manager, it took some convincing. A lawyer. But the key worked. My father, he left a few things. Some jewelry, my mother's, a deed to a small cabin upstate. And this." He pulled out several thick, bank-wrapped bundles of cash, neatly stacked. Not millions, not a gangster's hoard, but enough. He was saving it, Leo said, his voice thick. His escape fund. The bank manager said the box hadn't been opened since 1984. By law, it should have been turned over to the state, but it was in a private vault. Somehow, it got lost in the system. A clerical error. Until today. He pushed the stack of money toward them. Arthur put his hand on it. "We can't." "Please," Leo said. "My mother and I, we were fine. We had a good life." She was a strong woman. She worked as a seamstress. She put me through college. I, I'm a carpenter. I build things. Good, strong things. We didn't need this." He looked at Arthur, his eyes glistening. "But this isn't money. It's a blessing. And my father, I think he would want to thank the man who delivered his last message." He divided the stack in two. He pushed one half toward Arthur and Ellie. "This is not a reward. It's a share. You found it. It's your salvage." He used her word. Ellie looked at the money. It was more than they had seen in 20 years. It was the rent. It was the doctor. It was the car. It was safety. She looked at Arthur, her eyes shining, not with desperation, but with a fierce, burning pride. He wasn't a fool. He was her husband. "Thank you, Leo," she said, her voice clear. "Won't you come in for some tea?" Leo stayed for tea. He told them about his mother, how she'd taken him to Vermont, how she'd worked her fingers raw, how she'd never spoken of his father, but how she'd never dated, never looked at another man. He told them about his own life, his wife, his 2 daughters in college. He didn't mention the Mafia. He didn't mention the past. He just talked about his mom. And Arthur and Ellie, they talked too. For the first time in years, they talked about David. They told Leo about the farm, about the bronzed booty, about the hole that never really heals. They sat, the 3 of them, a strange new family, bound by a 40-year-old box. When he left, he shook Arthur's hand. He held it for a long time. "You're a good man, Arthur," he said. "So was your father," Arthur replied, in the end. Leo smiled. He got in his expensive car and drove away. Arthur and Ellie sat on the porch for a long time. The money was on the table, but they didn't touch it. They just sat, side by side, as the sun began to set, casting a warm, golden light over the dusty yard. The $100 gamble. The Mafia mansion. It wasn't about the house. It wasn't about the money. Ellie reached out and took Arthur's hand, his calloused, gnarled farmer's hand. "You found him, didn't you, Arthur?" she asked quietly. He nodded, looking at the horizon, at the sky painted in shades of purple and gold. "I think so, Elle." He squeezed her hand, the paper-thin skin, the familiar bones. "I think we all found our way home."